So that's okay.
Excellent. Does the microphone work? Yes, it looks like it's working out. Thank you very much, and a big thank especially today to the audience, because we changed the room 3 times. We changed the time, we changed the weather as well, so everything went wrong, but we thought, at least for a talk on energy, environment, and sustainability, we wanted to show some power from the sky. So that's going to be the starting point for today. Thank you also, of course, to all of those that had to, in the back, I would say, deal with the flexibility involved in all of you, and that's the great team here at MIT that set up the entire day of the visit here, including this talk, and obviously as well the team at Swissnex that has made it happen, and then the whole delegation that's together with our special guests. So we're delighted to have in town Federal Councillor Doris Leuthard, who's going to speak here in a minute. The agenda will be that she will make a first speech, really covering a broad range of topics linked to the environment and sustainability. If the meetings we had over this 2 days any, I would say, sign or anticipatory sign, especially for me, I think it's going to be very interesting to hear this, and will lead to, I'm sure, a few questions. Right after Federal Councillor Leuthard, we'll have Sarah Slaughter, who's part here of the, I would say, leadership team on sustainability. I had a chance to be a student in some of the classes led by Sarah. She's terrific. She's got a very broad knowledge, also great, I would say, work around water infrastructure. She's housed at the Sloan of Management, but really covers a lot of MIT. And then we'll also hear from Patrick Ebischer, the president of EPFL, our Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne. You might have seen or heard Patrick or the EPFL in different formats. Be it on the water with Alinghi when we had some good things, in the air with Solar Impulse, and I'm sure I'm missing quite a few of the exciting projects at EPFL, but Patrick will fill in the blanks in a few minutes. So I would say the leading questions behind the talk here is a little bit looking forward, is really kind of thinking through energy and the environment becomes a pressing issue around the world, and action is needed, and action comes in many forms, and this was also the reason of the trip here by Federal Councillor Leuthard. She started in Washington, D.C., where she was welcome, and a trip organized by our ambassador, Manuel Zager, who's also in the room. I'm not sure Manuel is right here with some of his colleagues also from Washington, D.C. And from policy, we actually went to the more kind of academic and entrepreneurial ecosystem here around Cambridge, but it stayed, I would say, also very much a mix between policy and more academic discussion. So I think it's really, again, a great setting. I think there's a lot of things that we can talk together as a group, and as you know, if you know Swissnex Boston, we like to connect the dots. So this is really an invitation to kind of continue the conversation, first during the Q&A part, and then on any of the social media or other creative ways that we can find to kind of embrace a little bit the idea that we have a dialogue to all continue to further together. So I'm going to very briefly introduce Federal Councillor Doris Leuthard. She was, up until 2 years ago, if I'm not wrong, Minister of the Economy. So she had their responsibility that really covered a wide range of activities. I know very well the part of innovation, where she had a leadership role in terms of some of the programs that connect some of the small businesses to innovation. She was the president of the Swiss Confederation last year, and she's now here to really kind of continue thinking a little bit what are some of the strategic issues around sustainability and energy. So please join me in welcoming Federal Councillor Doris Leuthard to the podium.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this warmly welcome, and thank you for the time you spent with us here in a topic where Switzerland for many years is very sensitive and works on sustainability in a broader sense, and therefore coming from the economic affairs now to infrastructure, where I'm responsible for, I can manage also to get infrastructure in this thinking of sustainability. I'm responsible not only for energy, but also for the environment, for transportation, as well as for communication. So, and this matches quite well together, always under perspective that we want to save resources or be more efficient with resources. Because everybody knows the Earth is a wonderful yet merryless place. It can be wonderful when new life flourishes. It can be terrible when lives are lost as the result of a natural disaster, such as the volcanic eruption in South America, or a catastrophe due to human error or technical failure, such as the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, or a combination of the two, such as Fukushima. The Earth has supported life for millions of years, but what have we done with our planet? Unbridled growth and irresponsibility have led to an overexploitation and destruction of the environment. We therefore need to ask ourselves, and especially in politics, how long can we get away with wasting resources and excessively polluting the environment? How long can we put off finding solutions in drawn-out political debate? At the climate summit in Cancun last December, the world community wanted to agree on binding CO2 reduction targets. Although it was agreed that global temperatures should not be allowed to rise by more than 2 degrees Celsius, countries have not yet firmly committed themselves to achieving this target. We are still under negotiations, and it does not look very promising. In the meantime, it seems to be very difficult that progress can be made or that we can solve the problems of climate change. Many countries are setting their own priorities, whilst others believe that the problem should be dealt with the industrialized nations. The effects of climate change do not restrict themselves to national borders. Everybody knows that. And so any delay in action could be fatal. And the IPC reports, the experts from science tell this every year, but with not a big effect on politics. To reach the goal of 2 degrees Celsius, the countries who are in this negotiation process are clear that the existing national action plans do not reach the goal. They are not sufficient enough. We need to do more measures of mitigation, more measures on the financial side. Everyone is trying to protect their own interests instead of acting in the interest of the world community. And yet, interdisciplinary research and multinational cooperation is the key to the future. That's the conviction of Switzerland and I think most European countries. All of us can and should be aware of our responsibility and share in carrying the burden according to our economic possibilities. At the beginning of the 21st century, ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves at the crossroads, and that was the case also a century ago. Over the last 100 years, advances in science, in new technologies, and socio-democratic developments brought us a long way, despite 2 terrible world wars. Electrification brought prosperity. The expansion of transport networks made people much more mobile. Thanks to new means of communication, in 1900, William McKinley was the first US president who told conversations on the phone. People had moved closer to each other, and this will continue. We must therefore ensure that we also find technological solutions to the world's current acute energy and climate problems. What legacy will we leave the people on Earth at the end of our millennium? We can choose more or less one of 3 paths to the future. The first one is that we continue with business as usual, uncontrolled growth, and increasing levels of pollution are likely to cause the Earth's ecosystem to collapse. If we introduce too many restrictions, prohibitions, or false incentives into society and bury ourselves in the past, we risk a massive reduction in living standards in the industrialized nations and artificially stifling developing countries. If we look to the future, perhaps we can make this world a better place with greater democratic involvement and fairer economic participation. One thing seems to be clear: the future does not give us any choice. As humans, we usually don't react until it is too late. It would make more sense to increase the sustainability of society and the economy continuously, in particular in terms of energy use. We have the opportunity to do this. We have the scientific know-how, and we have the technological know-how. I will show this during my 2 days here in Boston. I can see it also in Switzerland, for example, in the international standing of our 2 federal institutes of technology. Science and technology are a means to an end, a means with which to create a sustainable future. We must also introduce changes in our societies and encourage a change in mentality. There has to be a general belief that living rivers, clean air, healthy forests, and an intact animal population are of greater value than unlimited economic growth or constantly rising stock markets. Over recent decades, humankind has focused on economic growth. Of course, it is understandable when a person suffering from hunger and poverty would first like to have enough to eat and a degree of prosperity. The environment often comes second. We Swiss also used to think for many decades and act in this way. But we have now been able to develop considerable sensitivity into our society for the environment and also to find clean technical solutions. As a densely populated country, we were forced to do this. And as a wealthy economy with sufficient financial resources, we are in a position to do this. Protecting the environment was often seen as a contradiction with welfare and economic growth. We could arrive that this is not the perception of today. We know that to have a long-standing, powerful economy, we need that economic interests and ecologic interests are going hand in hand. And we know also from a lot of studies that when we continue like this, we had now for several decades, the costs for damages in respect to our GDPs will be much higher than when we try to change into a more sustainable community. The whole world community must assume collective responsibility for the environment. For developing nations and emerging economies, this means taking action against resource exploitation, using science and technology to find ways to allow growth, but using natural resources sparingly. And it means raising awareness for environmental issues among the local population and invest in their education. For industrialized nations, this means investing more in sustainability, in particular in the field of energy. It means supporting developments in society and economic growth in the third world with low-cost, tried and tested technology. And it means for me also that we go ahead as good examples. There's one element which is also important to make a change, and these are the international organizations. There should regard international negotiations in also a way that everybody can find himself as a partner. We can ask ourselves also if the principle of anonymity is the only way of finding solutions in multilateral organizations. Creating majorities by paying more attention to the problems of minorities and the specific requirements of different regions must play a role to find consensus and respecting also the different degrees of development. For it is very difficult to achieve anonymity in a world characterized by individualism and particular interest in which everyone wants the best for himself. We need more common sense, as defined by Aristotle and proposed by Thomas Paine on the 10th of January 1776 during the American bid for independence. We must work together using science and technology to foster economic, social, and personal development for all people in the world. The first step along this path is to achieve a balance between the economy and ecology. Perhaps Adam Smith can provide us with some answers. Let us take his economic analogy on the division of labor and prosperity and turn it into an ecological analogy for environmental protection and quality of life. According to Adam Smith, the division of labor is a means of improving overall prosperity, from which even the lowest sections of society can benefit. In a similar way, global efforts to protect the environment, supported by science and technology, can make living and working on our fragile planet a much richer experience, and in the truest sense of the word. We need to find a common climate denominator and give the Earth the breathing space it so desperately needs. We should therefore make considerable efforts to find economic and technological answers to the numerous ecological challenges we face. The intense research activities at universities around the world constantly provide us with new discoveries. We have seen huge innovation in the field of energy in recent years, and the visit here on MIT showed me that a lot of things are going on and the potential is huge, especially in the field of energy. Vital networking between the individual scientific disciplines, institutes, and practical business applications will lead to new solutions. I have no doubt that business and industry will support such a policy. Innovative entrepreneurs have an interest in investing and eco-friendly products. Politics, therefore, must create the incentives and market mechanisms necessary for technology transfer to take place and to make new environmentally friendly products accessible to the consumers. We must ensure that new climate-friendly technologies can also be used in the developing world. Protection of the environment, clean tech, a green economy, those are values which were important in Switzerland, long before it was talked about elsewhere. Back in the 19th century, we introduced a sustainable forest policy in order to put a stop to the overexploitation of our forests. In the mid-20th century, Switzerland began the construction of large dams and hydropower storage, turning the country into Europe's power accumulator. In the 80s, we introduced recycling of glass and aluminium on a large scale. Towards the end of the last century, we created standards for energy-saving building construction and heat insulation. 20 years ago, Swiss engineers built solar vehicles, which won the World Solar Challenge in Australia, the toughest race in the world for solar vehicles. In our new energy policy strategy, which the government decided in May, we plan now to phase out nuclear power, medium term and on a gradual basis. We think that our society does not want to live anymore with this risk. This is a smooth continuation on our tried and tested environment, research and innovation policies. It is ambitious, but we are convinced we can do that. And it is possible also to do it with the help of technologies. We will therefore change our energy mix with a higher amount of renewables, and we will make more efforts to decrease our consumption of energy and electricity. Efficiency will be very important that we can compete and that we reach our goal. In Switzerland, therefore, huge emphasis is put on education and research. In the last 4 years, we increased our budgets by 6% per year, and in total we spend 3% of our GDP in this sector, because we know only brains, only very good technical results can help us to change this world. In this way, politics can provide incentives and can create opportunities for innovative minds. The field of science, in particular on our Federal Institutes of Technologies, set trends for the future. They set trends which are so important for the planet. For instance, the solar fuel project, or a new type of solar cell, the Grätzel cell, which uses bionics. Thanks to liberal research and development politics, Switzerland regularly appears in ratings as the most competitive and most innovative workplace all over the world. This provides for us the basis for prosperity and quality of life we enjoy, and it is also one of the reasons why we can generally survive economic crisis without too much trouble and with low unemployment rates. All of us here today know that we can expect great challenges because of climate change, resource scarcity, and demographic changes over the next 20 or 30 years. We must prepare to this future. It is therefore not very helpful to think and act in 4-year election cycles like many politicians do. We can learn, perhaps also here from a scientific area, that we must think in 10, 20, 30 years and plan and prepare the ground also in this timetable. We are more likely to reach our goals if we think and act over decades, especially in the area of environment, energy, and infrastructure in general. Switzerland is here as a partner. Switzerland alone cannot make a difference. We are a small country, although potential economic-wise. We need international commitment, we need a close cooperation, and we need actions and not only plans. I hope that you as scientists and as engaged people in a sustainable world can make a difference and can deliver us with new technologies and with a commitment that this planet is a planet who can live also with a quality of life, with growth, with a growing population in a sustainable way. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Federal Councillor Doris Leutard. And now to put this into perspective and add to the discussion, I'm really very pleased that Sarah Slaughter is going to join here at the podium. Sarah was not only the one who brought the world of sustainability into the Sloan School and further into the industry, but I've also seen her very active with some of the students group, and we had a chance to sit down with the MIT Energy Club and others. So I think both with the outside industry and inside, she's been a true leader in sustainability. So welcome to the podium, Sarah.
It was such a pleasure hearing your talk, because I think that really encapsulated a lot of the thought at the leading edge of what's going on internationally. When we started the sustainability initiative at MIT 5 years ago, there was a real feeling among the students and among the different faculty that not only was there a great urgency, as you mentioned, that there were clear needs to use all of our resources much more effectively and to really look at the long-term impacts across the environment, but we also saw it as an incredible opportunity to really transform organizations and markets and communities. And that there's this idea of the balance between the opportunity and the urgency becomes an incredibly exciting place for university to really be able to contribute. When we looked at it, we were seeing a lot of companies looking at how are they doing what they do? You know, how are they running their operations? How are they using their facilities? How are they using the transportation systems? And were there opportunities for them to be a lot more effective in how they do what they do? The next stage we saw with many organizations is they started to look at not only how they did things, but also what they were doing. What were the core products and services that those organizations were providing? And was that really the most effective thing for what the world and for their market? So for instance, you probably heard about dematerialization, which is where rather than selling a product, you sell the service. So buying an airplane ticket is an idea of you get the service, you don't own the seat. You may want to buy the seat if you really think they're comfortable, but you really just buy the service of it being associated with an airplane. So the idea of really saying, how do we move to different types of products and services? But then the third thing that we saw, the third strategy that we saw many organizations moving to is not only thinking about how they do what they do and what do they do, but also where do they do it. And that an organization is really only as strong as the community in which it has its operations. And if its employees are worried about the schools, if they're worried about safety, if they're worried about clean water, they're not going to be focused on doing the things that the organization is trying to do. And so in especially thinking about it in sustainable communities, really thinking about how do you have these broad partnerships. And that was another point that you brought up, was really thinking about collaboration across different organizational boundaries. Thinking about how do we get governments and companies and nonprofits and community groups really working together to identify potential solutions, to really assess what is the most effective way of going about things. What we've also seen is that in developing these new approaches, also as you mentioned, the need for multidisciplinary approaches. That we have been pulling together a team across all of the schools at MIT. So I'm now with the Energy Initiative, working across all the different schools. And when you have a biologist and an architect and a chemical engineer sitting together, thinking about what the building material of the future is going to be, you get very interesting answers, which are not necessarily what you used to get. As they say, this is not your father's concrete. So this opportunity to really change things up and have these kinds of conversations about what is really possible in different areas. And one of the things that we've also seen within the MIT community and with our partners outside of MIT is really thinking at it as in all of these different scales. Thinking about individual responsibility, organizational responsibility, what's possible at the community and the regional scales, as well as what's happening at the national and the international scales. And as you mentioned, there's many opportunities for policy to provide a new context in which new opportunities are really made available. So in the United States, especially associated with the built environment, there was the Energy Independence and Security Act, which was passed in 2007. And among other things, what it requires is for all federal agencies, for all of the buildings that they own and also they lease, and for new and for existing buildings to be net zero by 2030. And what it also requires is for all of those facilities to have a 30% reduction in energy use and a 16% reduction in water use by 2015. Now, you may think this is crazy, nobody's ever actually going to do this. But one of the things that's very interesting is working with the various federal agencies internationally, or across the country, and with working partners internationally. We know there are technologies that are out there right now that can allow us to meet those requirements. And they save money. So upgrading the existing buildings is not only the quickest and the most effective, but it's also the most cost-efficient way of really addressing a lot of these issues. And so one of the things that we're seeing is these kinds of opportunities to really set the context for what the performance should be. And then what we're seeing is that those government purchases can actually be a demand pull through the whole economy. So all of those startup companies that you mentioned that really want to focus on green technology or much more efficient technologies, 5 years ago, they were looking for customers. And everybody would say, I'll do that later when I've got infinite amounts of money and when I've got lots of time. Now they're starting to see people coming to them and saying, we want this now, we want this immediately, and how fast can you roll it out to all of our facilities? And it's a very exciting time, and it's a very exciting context. So thank you very much for your talks today.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And to complete the picture and bring it home, especially to an audience where I think science and technology is the major part of your day, if not the entire day for most of you, I'm really pleased that Patrick Abisher has also accepted to give a few remarks. He's also been very involved in some of the work we've done at Swissnex and some of the, I would say, kind of forward-looking energy and other initiatives that are going on in Switzerland to represent the kind of academic science and research. Let's welcome Patrick Abisher.
So it's difficult to be the last one, but I can only agree with what was said. And as our minister, Mr. Lothar, told you, we are facing now an interesting issue in Switzerland, a problem, in the sense that I think the government took the brave decision to, in fact, say that we will not continue to build nuclear plants, that we will use those until we can no more use them. That means that we have about 30 years to find solutions. Now, interesting thing in Switzerland, we were probably the best country in terms of electricity, in terms we had nearly a zero CO2 emission, because about close to 60% was hydroelectric and the other was nuclear. Very small part on biogas. So it's really, we were to some extent the perfect country. And now we have this challenge to to maintain this, but with new technologies. So that's the challenge. The good news is that we have 30 years to do it. And the other good news is our government promised some more resources to try to find solutions, because I always tell them we have to be truthful as a scientist. We do not have today the solutions. But I think we have ideas of where we can go. And I think we will go into major investment into renewables, in storage, which is going to be so important, in efficiency. So we know those. But this will take time. And the first and most important is to get our students to believe in it. And I think that's the good news. Because the students are really passionate about it. And I felt this is the same thing here. I think the younger generation really believes that we have to go to a low carbon society. And they have the spirit to say, yes, we will do it. And I think this is going to be the most important. So I think we also have to be logical ourselves. And I think we have to walk the talk. And I think that's where we have embarked on several, I would say, world-class technical university on the concept of creating sustainable campuses. I think, and I'm very glad that MIT is part of it. We meet in Davos, 20 presidents of the so-called probably most advanced world-class university, and we've decided that we will develop sustainable campuses. Now you have to realize this is very different if you Tokyo University, or if you are, we have a little advantage in Lausanne because we have a Lake Geneva. In fact, it's interesting that our predecessors were very visionary, and through heat pumps were able, in fact, to provide very efficient heating and cooling But now, as my friend, the president of the University of Tokyo, has told me, not everybody has a chance to have a glacial lake next to its campus. So I think this also shows that we need to share those technologies. And I think that's why we cannot work just by ourselves. I think we're going to have to share. And I think the second, very important thing is we're going to have to share with the communities we're based in. And this is another initiative we're taking now, is not only we have this chart to say we're going to develop sustainable campuses, but we will work with the communities where we're located. And again, I think this is going to be very important. And I think this is a key education component. Now, of course, the research will have to be fostered even further. And I must admit there, a lot of us were passionate about what I call the info, nano, bio, cogno convergence. And to some extent, energy-related research was seen as more classical. And a lot of us probably didn't invest the last decade or so the amount that we should have done, probably. And I think, as we say in French, we have to do amende honorable. We have to go back and say, we have now to reset some of the priorities. But I think this is exciting, and we're ready to take the challenge. And that will imply several things. First, as we said, we have to promote transdisciplinarity, which is not something that science knows well. We're very much brought in a very disciplined fashion. So I think, and I was very interested to see here in Boston, both at Harvard and MIT, how you're trying to cope with this issue. And I was very impressed to see, for example, the graduate club on energy and sustainability. Again, I think it goes through a lot of the young people that we have in. I think we have to have new instruments. You had the initiative on energy. We have what we call a center on energy, both ETH Zurich and EPFL, and the Paul Scherrer Institute, which is a key, because those three institutions, in fact, do about 75% of the research in energy in Switzerland. So we have a real responsibility, but again, we're ready to take on. And the last one would be probably how to transfer this to society. And I think tech transfer will be extremely important in this regard. And I think, again, we have to think in a different way. We've used to do it in the IT sector to some extent, in the biotech sector. Venture capitals have worked well. These days, maybe a little more difficult in biotech. But I'm not sure that the model that we have used for those domain will necessarily work for clean tech. The investment that you do in IT is really small. You see the results very quickly. It's immaterial to some extent. I think the investment we need to put into clean tech is very significant. So I think we have to find new ways. And that's where Switzerland has an interesting position, in the sense that, yes, we have those top institutions, but we have also what we call the University of Applied Sciences, but also vocational training, and a lot of SMEs, small and medium enterprise, that I believe will be very important to implement some of those technologies. And because we don't have, I think the big, large companies are starting to think, but this is a cultural change for them, to go to academia to get some of the brightest ideas, because it has been a nice business to some extent until now. So if there's no pressure, why should we change? And that's where the politics has a lot to do. And I think by taking brave decisions like Switzerland took, I think this will force everybody, at least in our country. But as our minister was saying, we're dropping the buckets. Switzerland is so small. But I think by working together, like institutions like MIT and China, we will all try, work hard to find a solution. It will not be easy, but we have no choice than find one. And that's why we're ready to take on the challenge, the top world-class university, to try to find a real solution to this problem. Thank you.